Hey, what's up, everybody? This is Terrence here. I'm coming to you from Hong Kong, where I recently just woke up. It's about noon here right now, so a couple hours ago, I woke up and I read the news about Ultimate Poker closing up shop in Nevada, and I wanted to give my thoughts on that. I worked there for 16 months, so I have a lot of emotions that are going through. My thoughts firstly go out to all the people who who worked for that company, the people that I met there, the people who lost their jobs, and I'm very sad for them. I hope that they are able to find some work in this Nevada job climate, which is not the best right now. Um, the other thing I guess I want to say is that even though I'm going to be critical in a lot of places here in this video, um, I'm not here to stomp on the grave. I've seen a lot of that on 2+2 and on Twitter and so on, and I think there's a really strong tendency to say that oh, if you guys would only listen to me or my ideas, you guys would have made it. You guys would survive. You brought this upon yourself because you didn't listen. And I think that's natural because everybody thinks that their own opinion is great or is more valuable. And I'm also going to guard against that here. And I want to give my perspective on things, but I'm also not here to say that I'm better than anybody else. So so I'm open to discussion on this topic. I know I have a lot of coworkers who who read my blog and follow me on Twitter and stuff like that. So I encourage them at all levels. If you have anything to agree with, disagree with, change, edit, whatever, please give your point of view. Um, I don't claim to have the only perspective on this. And if you're here for just to stomp on the ultimate poker grave, then well, that's not what you're here for, and quite frankly, you can go fuck yourself because, like I said, good people lost their jobs today, so if you're there celebrating that this happened, then yeah, you're an asshole. Um, I'll talk about why I didn't say anything for so long. Obviously, I left the company in July. It's now November. And that's mostly because I was protecting the people that still work there, a lot of people that I like, but at this point there's no one to protect anymore. Towards the final days, it wasn't really fun to work there. And especially for me, I felt like sort of in the role of customer service that I was mostly brought on for, that was kind of handling itself, but I didn't see any, progress anywhere. Everybody tried to really make it fun. It was, for a long time, it was a really good team environment. And even near the end, we would have, like Mexican theme party days or, food trucks. And I personally taught a boxing class, an intro boxing class for people who might be interested. We did it in the warehouse. People organized volunteer work. Near the end, sometime in July, they even brought in Dana White, and he gave an amazing speech about how the UFC went through all these tough times, after its acquisition, and it's awesome now, but people didn't know how low we were, and how much trouble we were in. But it really wasn't enough. It's never enough to do these sort of things when the people don't believe. It's everybody thinks that startups are about, oh, we have a foosball table and this and that and the other thing. But people have to believe in the company that they're doing something. You don't have to be curing cancer or rescuing orphanages in Africa or anything. But you have to believe that the thing that you're doing is really worth doing and really going to be successful. And in the beginning, it was fun. It was a ton of work. Now I worked a ton of hours, and so did most other people. So let me sort of go back to that beginning era. First pitched on the idea, I think, of working for Ultimate Gaming. I think it was early 2012 that Joe Versace, who was head of marketing and operations, contacted me, CMO, COO, and I was really excited. The UFC connection, obviously. I was excited about the people involved. It was even excited about the proprietary software, that's been so maligned. I liked the idea that we had our own control and that it would be in-house and we would still have the same people who created that software folded into the company and working for that company, because I mean, there's nothing worse than to not have control over your own software. Um, I was sent a slide deck. For those in the business who aren't in the business world, the slide deck is basically just a PowerPoint presentation of some slides to kind of show what your company's all about. And it was sexy. It was awesome. I mean, I don't have it anymore, but it would say things like, yeah, we live for the thrill of 4-bet bluffing, or of your opponent shoving into you when you have the nuts. It was that kind of stuff that was it was clearly like written and made by a poker player. So immediately I got the sense that this really was a poker site and wanted to be a poker site. And the fact that they were talking to me, not to do my own horn or anything, kind of made it feel that way, because hey, it's not like Terrence Chan is like like a Phil Hellmuth, household name or something like that. I'm somebody that you only know if you've been in online poker for a while. And we had a lot of really experienced poker minds, great poker minds. We probably had half dozen people who, would have been the equivalent of supernovas and supernova elites. And many of those people were all like really good business minds. Like I mentioned Joe, and I don't. And Joe was definitely not one of these guys. He was never a pro poker player or anything like that. But I think he was a great leader, to bring all of these poker people together. He was uncompromising. He stood for what he believed in, and I would work for him again in a heartbeat. If I worked, but rather not do that these days, as it's become apparent. But yeah, we had a lot of really great people, and the criticism that was always leveled upon us is, oh, we never listened to the players and all this kind of stuff. And I want to talk a little bit about that. My major role was in customer service. So in the beginning we were 7 people. So I got my fair share of direct contact with players, and still did towards the very end. And I think doing customer service really gives you a good feel of what's wrong, because players tell you the same things over and over. The things that they're mad about, mad about consistently. And they're the same things that I would be saying if I were a player on Ultimate Poker, and I played the free money version of the software. We had like a weekly tournament, and I would point out, well, this is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong. And there are some people out there. I mean, Will Reynolds and Randy Dorfman, I think, most strongly among them, and they've tried to paint this picture of, oh, well, we told them this was wrong, and they had to fix this, but they just wouldn't listen. Instead, they did this and this other thing. And while I actually agree with the main points of guys like Randy and Will about what needed to be done, I don't think they were wrong. I think they were right. I thought it was kind of a bullshit cheap shot that for them to act like nobody in this company knows what's going on, and we're just ignoring all of the players in this. Because guys like myself and Chris Danik and Scott Yates and lots of people in this company who have played millions of hands of online experience, we knew what needed to be done. We had every range of players. We had supernova elites. We had grinder types. We had the amateur wannabe pros. We had the recreational players who didn't care. Like, we really had all of these people in the company because they wanted to work for the company. Whether they're back, when it comes to the serious players, most of them have been former pro poker players. But when it comes to the more recreational or amateur players, they maybe, whether they worked in accounting or compliance or in customer support or something else, they were people who played online poker, and we regularly sought those opinions across the board. What we lacked was the political pull, the ability, and the time and the technical resources to get all of these things done. And this was probably a top 3 frustration point for me working in a company, because I got sick of responding to players, whether it was on 2+2 or directly, or in our FAQs or whatever correspondence I would have, or in person. And I would say the same thing over and over. Yes, we know that's a bug. Yes, we know it's important. It's a big deal. And yes, we're working on it. And quite frankly, I was tired of just looking like an asshole, because that was my job. And while people like Chris Danik and also our project manager David Gagne did a great job trying to prioritize what we needed to fix and what we had the resources for and how to allocate, it was kind of never going to be enough. we were starting from too far of a deficit. Um, People would say things like, why are you guys spending money on your pros? Why are you spending time making, content videos and me versus you videos and message from the chairman videos, and why don't you just spend that money and fix the software? It's not really a case of spending money on pros and content instead of software, but it's more that it was kind of the only place that Ultimate could remotely make an impact, and it was definitely the only place where there was any sort of competitive advantage because the technology was so far behind. Um, Product improvement itself wasn't part of my job description in any sort of way. I was a customer service guy, a payments guy, anti-fraud guy. But obviously I have a lot of experience, and over time, all of the things that I was responsible for kind of started to move without my direct data input, in great part thanks to a great customer service team I had, a great payments team that I have, supervisors and managers in payments customer service that basically I didn't have, I could just sort of guide instead of, be the drill sergeant on that kind of stuff. So I started to stick my head into product development meetings as much as possible because I knew that we weren't going to get anywhere because of that. And one of the things that kind of upset me is there was definitely a tendency towards getting excited about new and exciting things and features and developments as opposed to, trying to capture market share that we didn't have, as opposed to, holding on to the people who we did have and not doing the things that drive them away. Bugs drive people away tremendously, and I don't think we focused enough on that. We basically had one really great QA guy named Ali, but we only had one. This guy filed, collected, reproduced bugs. He was a machine of a bug collecting and identifying and reproducing machine. He created this tremendously long backlog, and he probably couldn't even catch all of them because he's just one man. We had an outsourced QA team, quote unquote, in China. It was a Beijing team, and they probably do some technical testing that I'm not familiar with, and I'm sure their role was function, but eventually they got dissolved. But Ali, I thought, did 10 times more work than this entire company in China did that we were paying to try to do QA. But as I said, we only have one of them, and I start to think that maybe we only have one of him because it really doesn't matter how many bugs you can identify and reproduce if you don't have the bandwidth to fix them. There were a lot of emphasis on meeting deadlines as opposed to quality control, and we had to meet these deadlines, and I understand that because that's kind of how you hold software people accountable, is are they meeting deadlines? But we released things, and we made every release. I think every release had a major non-stopper bug. We would often have to revert back. We would have to have emergency patch submitted to the DGE, the Department of Gaming Enforcement in New Jersey, or the Nevada Gaming Commission. I've talked a little bit about regulation and the hindrance on technology in my written blog post, so I won't go into that here. I'll just sort of keep this to stuff that happened internally. So that's one thing I wanted to mention. It wasn't this like, hey, why don't you guys spend more money on software? In truth, I think for a startup, and I'm not privy to the numbers and the accounting, but I feel like we probably spent too much money, too many people, too many salaries, too big of salaries. I mean, I think that I did great work there, but for startup, I was probably paid too much, and I was nowhere near the salaries of the people who are above me. And I really kind of feel like for startups, people with high executive positions should probably be paid by performance, whether that's in terms of equity packages or whether that's in terms of performance bonuses. But I was really disenchanted with the salaries that a lot of the top people made. By the way, this was eventually made public by accident because somebody was careless and left a list of salaries lying around. Because I feel like, while the people at the bottom have to, make rent and pay the bills and do all that kind of stuff, I think upper executives, largely you become an upper executive because you've made money and been successful in other areas. So I feel like performance should probably be tied a little bit more to that. But we had a lot of bodies, we had a lot of heads, and I personally offered to take salary cuts for the people that I thought on my team that I deserved. And I'll talk a bit more about that later on because it's in a sort of separate topic. I was talking about marketing, and marketing is not something I will talk too much about because it's not my area of expertise. It's not something I was intimately involved in. I went to a lot of the meetings, but mostly I kind of listened. Once in a while I might contribute an idea that might be unique for poker players. But I'm certainly not an expert in there. But I did witness a lot of ideas getting shot down for various reasons. Some for regulation, but also because I think there was a lot of application of the old school brick and mortar model to this new internet business, and I think that was a bit anachronistic. And I'm talking about everything here. I'm talking about poker room promotions, casino promotions, advertising, social media, branding, like literally everything was influenced, to say the least, by station casinos and the top brass there who they had an old school approach. Station casinos have been very successful in Las Vegas with their 17 Vegas locations. They're a great locals joint. So, it is useful to cultivate some of that, but at the same time recognize that this is a new industry and a new thing. There's a story, there's a legend about one of these executives sitting through a meeting. I wasn't there for this, but this guy was, they were showing him the new unveiling of the redesigned website for the casino in New Jersey, and they had to like explain things to him, like what a nav bar is, or what flash is, and that kind of stuff. So there's this really lengthy walkthrough of this website redesign, and at the end of it, sits there and he comments, "I think the logo needs more purple." And that's sort of like the crazy thing. That was part of our culture, that somebody could sort of sit through an hour and say, well, you've clearly put a lot of thought into this, but it needs more purple. This is the kind of stuff, like, I don't mean to come off as someone who feels that, like, oh, all, your employees should just run around it and do kind of whatever. Because it's certainly not the case. You have to have guidance, and you have to show people where it's not, where they might be failing. But I think it's sort of, to some extent, like, if you back a poker player, to use an example that most people reading this will understand. If you back a poker player, you're not necessarily going to agree with every decision they made on every hand, right? So they might come to you on a break and tell you, they played this hand this way, and you might say, no, I wouldn't have played it that way. But in general, you wouldn't want to kind of swoop in and change the hands that they're playing. Just like interrupt them mid, even if such a thing were allowed in poker, you wouldn't want to like interrupt them on the turn and say like, no, actually we're going to raise instead of fold here. Because they have an overall global strategy, and if you're willing to back this person, much as if you're willing to hire an employee and keep an employee, you are implicitly trusting them to make good decisions overall. And so when you just kind of pull and prod needless things like, oh, well, I think your cutoff here should be 10-8 suited instead of 9-7 suited, that's unnecessary. It's unhealthy. So overall, one of the big problems of the company is that most people weren't able to do what they needed to do, and this is the kind of stuff that a lot of people in this company had to deal with. For me, for my part, I was largely sheltered from it because they didn't know a lot about customer service, or maybe they didn't care too much about it. I had to deal with it in some aspects. One example that I'll give. Um, sorry, I'm just gonna shut this window here. One example that I'll give is that in the very beginning, I thought we were understaffed and that we shouldn't have support via phones, or at least we shouldn't have it 24/7. Because I felt that it was much more efficient to handle things through email and through live chat. This was something that was shot down, and so we had to prominently put a support phone number on the website, and we got jammed. I mean, we probably would have jammed an email, live chat, and all of that too, but we got jammed really hard, and we were understaffed, which, I kind of knew. But mostly, it was okay. Like, they left me alone. At least after a little while, probably because they were just more concerned about the marketing and the product aspects of things, especially the marketing. They were very heavily involved in marketing, probably more than anything. But I don't think we got good reviews for customer service. I don't think customer service was good at Ultimate because of me, because I certainly made a lot of mistakes. It was good because they kind of let us stumble around and figure it out. I was the leader, so I made mistakes and I stumbled around and we iterated, and we were very nimble and flexible because mostly they were worried about other things. So we just kind of floated under the radar, and were able to do a lot of different things, and I think that's why ultimately we were successful. I think there was a lot of rigidness in the HR practices, which I think is another super frustrating point to me, and I'll point to as another sort of driver of failure. We failed to hang on to a lot of good people, and we failed to reward a lot of good people. There were false promises, promises that were never kept about salary reviews, performance reviews. And a lot of what frustrated me was a lot of the people that this affected were people who were willing to come in the door at the low price. So back when a lot of people were really bullish on Ultimate Poker, they said, or online poker in Nevada, or regulated online poker in the US in general, they came in and said, hey, I want to be a part of this. I'll come in at a low salary. So people were coming in at high 20, like low 30K a year, low 40K a year, these kinds of salaries that were a lot less than they had made in their previous job because they wanted to be a part of something. And that makes a lot of sense. And I'm guilty of giving this promise as well, because I saw it happen at Stars. Because at Stars, I hired people for $5 an hour who now make well into the solid six figures, 10 years later. So I did sell this dream because I believed in it. Obviously you never put it that way, that you can go from making minimum wage to hundreds of thousands a year, but just putting the idea out there. But there were people who took low salaries and performed really, really, really well, and they were never compensated for it, which definitely frustrated me. There would be people who I legitimately thought probably deserved 80, 90, or 100 a year. They were being paid like 40, and then they would get a raise to like 45, and then HR or senior management would say, well, it's just not reasonable to give them a raise to 70 or 80 because that messes up the structure. And I said, well, are they worth that much? And they said, yeah, they probably are, but they'll get there eventually. But I think that was a lie. I think basically the people who were well compensated were the people who negotiated well at the beginning, people who got in at the beginning, to be perfectly honest, when the company had more money. Like I said, they paid me a pretty high salary, and they paid my replacement probably, I don't know, a third of that, for doing pretty much the same job. So that frustrates me. And at the same time, we spent a bunch of money on advertising and external consultants. The consultants in particular, they spent obscene amounts of money, amounts that make me ill, because I knew that a lot of these top contributors were being underpaid. whether it was marketing consulting companies or technology consulting, it was very frustrating to see, to hear about the bills that these companies are charging, and at the same time know that we can't throw an extra 10,000 at somebody that you know the entire company thinks is a superstar. If we had a failing in this company, it was not a failure to invest in technology. I think that's just a symptom. It was a failure to invest in the people. And a lot of these people were truly invested in the company. There were a lot of people who started, like I said, myself included, who were wide-eyed and super excited to be on this frontier, who are just as passionate about poker as me, if not more, and really, really wanted to be a part of this, and really wanted to be something, and tried their asses off. And at the same time, there were people who also really didn't care that much. People for whom this was a paycheck. I'll go off on a tangent. One of the people who I think was really excited about this, and I know this because I lived with him, is of course my good friend Chris Danik. I'm okay with saying that, and Chris will never say this, he'll never complain about this, so I'm going to do it for him, and hopefully he doesn't get mad at me for this. But he got shit on a lot, and he got blamed for a lot of shit. And his title, he was supposed to be poker product manager, so you have a poker product, the poker product sucks. Who do you blame? The poker product manager. In the public sphere, that makes sense, but like I said, it was very hard for him and for other people to get these things pushed through. I think Danik, he would show me the priority chart, and for the most part, I thought it was pretty good. Sometimes I disagree. Well, I think number 6 should actually be number 4 or whatever. But I think if most people, poker players, looked at this, they would think that it's a reasonable thing. But none of this stuff ever got done, so who cares what order it's in? Very little ever got done. But talking about Danik, he got shit on and pissed on within the company by a lot of people. But this is a guy that I lived with, and we would go out to dinner, and he would talk about a way to fix something, a product improvement of some variety, and we would talk about this at dinner, and he wouldn't stop, and we'd go home, and he'd still be talking about it. And it'd be 10 p.m., 11 p.m. I'd be sitting there fucking watching Netflix, and he's like, I gotta go to work. And I was like, you're going to work at 11 p.m.? He's like, yeah, I'm gonna go, I need my whiteboard. He had a big, huge whiteboard in his office. And I would come in the next morning at 7 a.m. or whatever, and his whiteboard would be full of ideas. It was like a crazy person. There's people writing on the walls in the insane asylum, it's just massive amounts of ideas and documentation. This is a guy who was really strongly invested in making the company and the product the best that it could be, and he got shit on more than probably anybody in the company. And you might think that I'm saying all of this stuff because I'm his friend, or I'm taking his side to be his friend, or I'm agreeing with him because I'm his friend, but it's actually the reverse. It's what Nassim Taleb would call an epiphenomenon. I'm not agreeing with him because he's my friend. He's my friend because I'm agreeing with him. We're friends because we've known each other for 10 years. I hired him at PokerStars. We've both been together in the industry a long time, and I respect his thought on this. But we had a culture of shitting on a lot of these ideas. There was a lot of leadership through fear and authority, and a lot of this is how it's going to be. Very top down. There was at the end very little dissent. There was very little discussion. People didn't want to dissent anymore because they didn't see it getting anywhere, or they would get yelled at. People get yelled at a lot, especially near the end. Not yelling matches, because I feel like screaming matches are actually a useful thing because it indicates passion. But when you're just being yelled at, that's not anything. So, and over time, this resistance to dissent means that people pick choose their battles, and we heard that a lot in the office. Like it would be like, you know, I really think that we should be doing Y instead of X, but we're doing X because, quite frankly, you know, I'm going to pick my battles and I don't want to fight this. We had this a lot. And I think anytime you have a company culture where people really on a regular, everyday basis have to, quote unquote, choose their battles, that's the sign of a dysfunctional company. Because it means it's a company where people can't say what they truly think will improve, you know, the company. You know, and to compare this a bit to, you know, to PokerStars. You know, PokerStars was definitely not a democracy. You know, the PokerStars that I worked for in 2002, 2004, Isai was very controlling. He was very much a part of, you know, he had his hands in everything. And so if it sounds like I'm saying that I don't think that upper management they should just get the fuck out of the way, then I think you're missing the point, because I don't believe that. The point is that people should never be afraid to dissent. And they should never feel like their contribution is not valued. Because quite frankly, if you have an employee and you don't value their contribution, you don't value their opinions, then you should just fire them, or at least tell them, like, hey, I'm not interested in hearing your shit anymore. Like I said, I had a lot of good people, a lot of direct reports, a lot of people that I'm really proud to have been associated with. I had a fairly large team. Near the end, I had probably about 20-ish reports, 3 direct reports, and then you know, about a 15 or so under them. I was never asked, or my input was never sought on how much they were compensated, which I thought was a shocking thing. Maybe this is common in the corporate world. I don't really know. But I was a director level position, which is, you know, whatever, junior executive or whatever. But I was never asked, like, hey, how's Lorena's performance? Is she doing a good job? What kind of compensation does she deserve? Or Jerry, or anybody like that. Or I was basically said, okay, this person now makes this much, go tell them. So there's that. This is getting really long, so I guess I'll sort of wrap this up. You know, eventually, like I said, as the culture sort of became one less of trying to improve this and more of, like, I don't want to get yelled at, I don't want to get fired, blah blah blah, I think people kind of stopped trying to improve the company. Probably for like the last 6 to 8 months, very little was done towards, like, hey, let's make this thing better. There wasn't like a really great attitude. Like I said, we would continue having company parties, and people still, I think, generally like to work with each other. Of course, there's always conflict in an office, but people generally liked each other. You know, an ex-coworker posted on Facebook today and tagged, you know, because obviously there's a lot of Facebook posts on my feed that are like, you know, really sorry to hear everybody lost their job, it's the end of an era, blah blah blah. And there was one that kind of tagged everybody in the company that he had worked with, and there's a lot of positive, you know, emotions and memories that are associated with this. But so I think people wanted to work with each other for the most part, but it just, you know, it didn't work out. And it really could have been a great company. I really do believe that, even with the problems of regulation, the problems of liquidity and being in one state, and all of the difficulties up against, I think Ultimate Gaming could have been great, but it's hard. We had the team to do it. It outlines how truly hard it is to do something really great in the startup world. And part of that is that, on one hand, you need a lot of different ideas. You need a lot of diversity of thought and of opinion and of skills to be successful. You need these diverse tactics, you know, to be able to see all the different things and implement all the different things. On the other hand, these diversities make it hard for everybody to be on the same page, you know. developers don't always want the same thing as operations people, who don't always want the same thing as marketing people, who don't always want the same things as customer service people. So they make it hard for everybody to be on the same page because everybody naturally kind of looks out for their own interest. And that's ultimately the true challenge of leadership. That's what makes leadership hard, is how do you get all of these people who have diverse skill sets and diverse opinions and backgrounds and thoughts and motivations, and how do you get them to the same place and take advantage of all of their unique skills and thoughts? And that's, when it comes down to it, probably, the single greatest cause of the fact of why Ultimate Gaming wasn't able to be successful. Because I think there are a lot of really talented, really smart people and hardworking people in the company, but there was never really the leadership available to get everybody aligned and to really knock this thing out. And whether it could have happened, we'll never know. But it is a sad day. It's something that I've learned a lot from, and I hope it's something that all the people who are involved in the operation learn from. And I think it'll hopefully make everything stronger. So that's my very lengthy discussion on my experience, my 16 months or so at Ultimate Poker and Ultimate Gaming. I hope you've enjoyed this. Sorry for the length of it, but hopefully you got something out of it. Bye.